Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is a screencast-o-matic presentation and a recording for your notes on third parties in the unit on political parties and voter behavior. Before we get started, please let me encourage you to open up to the correct part of today's lesson, and then once again fill in any key content that appears in the presentation. Before we get started, please let me preface today's lesson with this fundamental question. What are third parties in American politics, and are there actual benefits to voting for any third parties or third party candidates in elections? Let's consider that right now. So, third and minor parties in the United States, there's so many, and I think that often third parties unfortunately get overlooked. There are many different types of third parties in the United States. There's ideological parties, which are based on a particular set of beliefs. So, for example, there's like the Socialist Party, the Communist Party, and the Libertarian parties. And you might have heard of these words before. The fact is that these parties and these factions stand for different things that often get, of course, popular attention, but sometimes never actually any type of governmental standing in our institutions of power. There's also single issue parties, which focus on single public questions. So, for example, the Free Soil Party was opposed to slavery, and the Right to Life Party is opposed to abortion. When you think about single issues, there are many people across the American electorate who view different issues as really, really important to them personally, and so hence the reason why they might feel compelled to start single issue third parties. There are also economic protest parties too, which appear during economic downturns or depressions. So, for example, the Greenback Party is a popular party that appeared throughout the Americas, and also additionally, I would also say that the other social movements that stem to form movements like the Occupy Wall Street movement and the Tea Party are also key factions that comprise to form later third parties. There's also splinter parties, which split away from one of the major parties and become their own entity. So, for example, the Bull Moose Party was really important for Theodore Roosevelt. Even though he did not win as a Bull Moose candidate, he ran as a progressive Bull Moose and tried to rival the re-election of William Howard Taft and the election of Woodrow Wilson. Now, the most important and most successful of the third parties is the Bull Moose Party and splinter parties in general. But keep in mind here that usually these splinter parties form around one strong leader or a personality, as Theodore Roosevelt was in this way. Not a lot of third parties often have individuals who come and steal the national spotlight. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that third parties are drastically important. Sometimes third parties act as spoilers. And let me just explain this to you in a way that makes sense. So basically, when you define the spoiler rule in politics, we're talking about a strong third party candidate that can play a spoiler by pulling enough support away from one of the major candidates to affect the outcome of the election. In case you're wondering who this gentleman is right here, this is Ralph Nader, who ran a few times actually for president, and he lost all the times that he ran. However, most notably, he took a lot of votes away from Al Gore in the 2000 presidential election. And many people say that it's his fault that George W. Bush won, because had Nader not ran, Gore might have actually been president of the United States. It's always hard to say though, shoulda, coulda, woulda. The fact is that, third party candidates can in fact have this effect on presidential elections. But there are other reasons why third parties are also important. Third parties can play the role of the innovator. This basically means that they're more willing to take clear-cut stances on really controversial topics. The main parties often adopt the minor parties' stance over time. However, it should be noted here, guys, that typically Democrats and Republicans never propose anything like big or radical. They always want to try to win over as many voters as possible. So this desperate need to appeal kind of hinders their ability to put forth anything profound or anything that might actually change things for the better, for real. Some examples of this might be like the progressive income tax, where we tax the wealthy by a lot. Democrats over time have gotten cool with this idea. However, the fact is that this is still not totally popular. Women's suffrage, of course, was once radical, but then it became commonplace, right? And even buildings of railroads. This might seem trivial, but this was something that was deemed once upon a time to be radical, but then was commonplace in our political construct. Third parties also play the role of a critic. And so this means that, the minor parties who have been brushed aside, in many ways can sit back and be very critical of the major parties and their stances. They also draw a lot of attention to issues that the major parties would prefer to ignore. So I guess a great example of this would be, third parties have gotten the conversation started about marijuana legalization. There's even actually a third party called the Marijuana Party. And in many ways, of course, Republicans and Democrats over time have been forced to address this issue over, decriminalization and legalization and all those things like that. So, what are the top reasons that you should consider voting third party? Now, once again, as your teacher, I will never tell you how to vote. That's your democratic right, and every student comes to their own conclusions at their own times. But here are what some political scientists say from Pew Research about the top reasons to consider voting third party. Basically, number one, the big, powerful interests at the top pretty much own the two major parties. And I'm not trying to sound condescending here, but Wall Street, the special interests, big pharma, these big entities do control Republicans and Democrats at a big, big level. And so many people wonder, because of their influence, do Democrats and Republicans actually really care about you and me? Another reason here is that, voting third party can serve to vote for the lesser of two evils. There's a lot of people, for example, in the 2016 election who did not like Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, and so therefore they voted to vote for Jill Stein or Gary Johnson. People often like the underdogs, whether it's in movies or in elections. That's another key reason why people vote third party. Even though they might know in the back of their mind that they may not win, there's something good about voting for people who you might think otherwise may not have a chance. Third parties also stand for bigger and more profound change. As alluded to before, third parties often have the ability and the audacity to take radical stances to actually push an agenda forward that might actually make lives better for the people. Another good reason here, guys, is that third parties also advocate more ideologies that might reflect your own. So, for example, many people do feel like they are out of touch with the modern day Republican and Democratic parties, so therefore third parties in many ways might seem more relatable and, of course, more genuine in their intentions. Another reason why people might vote third parties, they feel a personal connection to the candidates themselves. Sometimes Republicans and Democrats at the top come across a little bit cold when they're campaigning, and they're lacking a genuine connection with the people that they need their vote from. However, third party candidates are known for being much more charismatic and down to earth and relatable and genuine, and in this way, this helps to translate not just to a better connection, but maybe to an actual vote. Some people just love bucking the system, and that's another reason why people might vote third party. Voting third party can prove a point to the other two parties at the top that, hey, I didn't like what you had to say throughout the campaign season and while you were on the campaign trail, and so now I'm going to vote third party, and now you lost my vote. And I know this might sound, kind of cocky to say, but that's what a lot of people, in fact, do believe today, that they are, in fact, changing the system. This can also send a strong, powerful message to the top two parties as well. If more and more people vote third party, this might cause them to maybe lend an ear or an eye to the things that these people who are voting third party might actually say. Another thing to consider here, guys, is that there's a push for more diversity in our politics. And so voting third party allows for people at the top to see that, hey, my interests are not being reflected by the Democrats and the Republicans, and I want to see more diversity in this way to reflect me. And then, of course, the last reason here, more people should feel free to vote. There's a benefit to voting third party. More and more people are doing it. In theory, the more people who vote, even if it's third party, the better off our democracy is. Keep in mind that democracy is defined by people getting involved and exercising their right to vote and express themselves. And so in this way, we should honor that and not admonish it. In closure here, you can see some quick graphics and images about third parties over time. For example, you can see here by this chart that third-party candidates have done decently well in taking away a number of votes from the top two presidential candidates at the time. Of course, one of the most popular names here, as alluded to before, was Theodore Roosevelt. You also might have remembered learning about Eugene V. Debs too in American Cultures too. Another thing to notice here over time is that I think the main reason why third-party candidates like Ross Perot have done so well is that for that period of time in American history, it's quite possible that neither side was really advocating for what the middle of America wanted. And so third parties have a chance to actually straddle the line in a way that is fusing together both sides. So I hope you're paying close attention, and I hope that you definitely complete the rest of the lesson thoroughly, because in the future, you're going to be doing a project on all the types of third parties. In fact, you're going to be choosing one of these, if not more, and of course, putting together a little bit of a poster to advertise why we should vote for that party and what they stand for. So Thank you very much for tuning in, and remember you can play any part of that presentation for help or clarity. Good luck with completing the rest of the lesson.